Okay, so the topic in this section is free will. Do we have it? What does it mean to have free will? And last time we looked at this view called determinism, which basically says we don't have free will. We looked at the arguments, which I'll review here in a second. Today we're going to look at another view called compatibilism. So just real quick, just to give you a preview of what we're doing, is we're going to look at compatibilism's critique of determinism, a couple objections that W.T. Stace, who is a compatibilist, levels against determinism, and then we're going to look at the view of compatibilism, at least Stace's version, and then we're going to look at a different version of compatibilism based off of a critique of the first version by Schlick. So just to recap the issue and the first view that we looked at, the main question is, do we have free will? The determinist says we do not have free will. And the basic argument, if you recall, goes something like this. Everything in nature is caused by something, it's determined by something. We are part of nature, so all of our behavior is caused by something. An action that's caused or determined cannot be free, and then it follows that none of our actions are free. And so what Stace is going to do, W.T. Stace, is he's going to try to show that we do have free will, even though everything in nature is caused. So he wants to retain this idea. This is just the scientific view of the world. Everything in nature has a cause, while at the same time sort of rescuing free will. So the reason why it's called compatibilism is because he's going to try to make compatible this first premise that everything has a cause with the claim that we have free will. And the way he's going to do it is he's going to criticize this third premise here, which is basically a definition of free will. So just to sum up here, the compatibilist disagrees with premise 3 and 4, but they're actually going to agree with premise 1 and 2. So we're going to look at two objections that W.T. Stace levels against determinism. The first one in his paper on this subject, he basically starts out by saying, you determinists say you don't have free will, but you certainly act like you do have free will. And there's a couple things going on in there, but I just want to summarize one sort of core feature of that critique. And it's this: if there's no free will, then there's no responsibility. And that seems like a problem, because we can't help but hold ourselves and others responsible. And it seems like we're justified in doing it sometimes. So just to kind of lay out this objection to determinism in step-by-step form, step 1, if determinism is true, then we are never justified in holding ourselves or others responsible. Yet we are justified in holding ourselves and others responsible, at least sometimes. Therefore, determinism is false. So this is just the step-by-step argument here. And the important premise is that first premise. So why is it that if we have no free will, then we're never really justified in holding others responsible? Well, I think this is kind of an intuitive idea. If somebody does something, say harms you in some kind of way, say they bump into you on the street, and you look at them and you think, oh, shame on you, and hold you responsible for doing that. But then you find out that, oh, it was just an accident. Maybe they tripped on a crack in the sidewalk, or somebody else pushed them. Then you're not as mad at them, right? And so you're not really holding them responsible, because them bumping into you wasn't really up to them. It was out of their control. They're not responsible. But if determinism is true, then all of our actions are like that. None of our actions are up to us. None of our actions are really in our control. They're just caused by external forces. So in a way, if determinism is true, then all actions that we take are kind of like accidents, and so we're not really responsible for them. It wouldn't make sense to hold people responsible for those kinds of actions, and that's how this objection goes. So just to sum up the alpha objection to determinism, it's basically saying that if determinism is true, then there's no responsibility at all. Yet it really seems like we do have responsibility, and so that's a problem for determinism. But let's move on to the other objection, which I'm calling the beta objection, that W.T. Stace gives to determinism. So this is the more important one, I think, because it's going to lead into W.T. Stace's view, his compatibilism. So let's just to set up the beta objection, let's just recall the determinist argument here. So steps 1 through 3. Premise 1, everything in nature is caused by something. We're part of nature, so our behavior is caused by something. An action that is caused is not free. Therefore, none of our actions are free. So that's just the determinist argument. The beta objection that Stace levels against this is going to target that third premise, this definition of a free action. He's going to disagree that an action that is caused is not free. And he's going to try to give an argument to support a different definition of a free action. And that argument is pretty important. So, for Stace, the problem of free will, the problem for determinism, rests on a semantic mistake, a mistake in the meaning of free will. So the belief that determinism is inconsistent with free will, or the belief that the fact that all things are caused is inconsistent with free will, it assumes a mistaken meaning of free will. So this determinism argument rests on, again, it rests on a mistaken meaning of free will. And so Stace is saying if we get the right meaning of free will down, then we can show how we do have free will, even though all things are caused, including all of our behavior. Okay. So now the task for Stace is to figure out, well, how do we discover the correct meaning of free will? What is the argument here? And the way that he approaches this, the task of finding the correct meaning of free will, is to look at how we commonly use language, how we commonly use this term free will. And so here's what he does. Here's his argument that supports his definition of free will, and his argument for why the determinist definition of free will is false. So what he does is he creates two categories of actions. In one category, we have 4 examples of what we would commonly say are free actions, just going by our sort of commonsensical use of the term free, our colloquial use of the term free. And then in the other category, he's going to give 4 examples of actions that we would just commonsensically call unfree actions. And the way you determine what makes an action free, or the correct definition of a free action, is you figure out what is common in the column of free acts, commonsensically free actions, that is absent from the column of what we would commonsensically call unfree actions. And so he's a common language philosopher, Stace, and so he's using just how we normally use these terms, free and unfree. So if we look at the free actions, we have one example, Gandhi fasting because he wanted to free India, stealing bread because one was hungry, signing a confession because one wanted to tell the truth, leaving the office because one just wanted to go to lunch. Okay, so Stace says, anyone would say that these are free actions, just based off of our common sense understanding of the definition. Okay, unfree action column. The man fasted in the desert because there was no food. One stole because one's employer threatened to beat one up. Somebody signed something because the police beat the person up. Someone left because they were forcibly removed. And so Stace is going to say these are actions that we would just commonsensically say are unfree. So what's common in column 1? That's absent from column 2. Now, if the determinist definition is correct, that an action is free if it's uncaused, then that's what we would see in column 1 that's absent from column 2, that these actions are uncaused and these actions are caused. But is that correct? Stace says no, and we can see that. In both of these columns, free and unfree, the actions are caused. And so what that suggests is that the determinist definition of a free action is incorrect. It's inconsistent with how we normally use the term free. A free action can be caused. All these are caused actions. These free actions are caused. And so now the question is, well, what does make an action free? Or how do we define an action that is free? What's the definition of a free action? Well, what's common in column 1 here that's absent from column 2? Well, the fact that these actions were done out of one's desire. And so it's not that they're uncaused that makes them free. Rather, it has a special kind of cause. These actions are free because they are caused by the agent, the person's desire. They did it because they wanted to. And so that suggests a new meaning of free will that Stace endorses, and that is sort of the backbone of his compatibilism. So, this new meaning of free will, according to Stace, is that an action is free if that action's immediate cause is the agent's strongest desire, the agent's wants. And just agent is a technical term here, a term of art and philosophy. It just refers to a being who has agency, who can make choices, who can make decisions. So people. So an agent is like a person, more or less, same thing. So if that's a free action, then an unfree action is an action whose immediate causes are states of affairs external to the agent, not the agent's desire. So someone pushing someone else, so the person moves because they're pushed by someone else, that's not free. It's caused by something external to the agent. Free action, it's determined by the agent's desires. Or more broadly, many compatibilists have taken Stace's view and developed it. Since Stace, a more common definition of a free action for the compatibilist is an action whose immediate cause is determined or is caused by the agent. So we get into this idea of agent causation. Maybe your will causes it. And there's a lot to talk about for that, but I want to keep it as simple as I can. And we'll just go for now with Stace's definition that an action is free if it's caused by the agent's desire. Okay, so at this point we've seen Stace's critique of determinism. We've seen the alpha and beta objection against determinism. The alpha objection says, well, if determinism is true, then no one's responsible for anything, but that doesn't make any sense. The beta objection says, well, the determinist gets the definition of free action wrong. Here's the right definition. And so what we see now is how Stace has at least attempted to make compatible the fact that all things are caused with the claim that we have free will. But now let's look at some critique of Stace's version of compatibilism. So we're going to call Stace's version of compatibilism V1 for version 1. So this is the version 1 of compatibilism. And just to get the summary of the beta objection on the screen, you have it there. You can pause it if you want to read through it. And this is just the summary of compatibilism V1. An action is free if it's caused by the agent's strongest desire. And one thing that's worth noting is that captures how a free action is kind of up to us in some kind of way. So I think that's a virtue of the theory. So that's compatibilism V1. But let's look at Schlick's objection to this version of compatibilism V1. I want to call this the delta objection to compatibilism V1. And it's kind of two parts. The first is it questions whether or not our free choices are really the result of our strongest desire. So you can imagine weakness of will, where maybe you're sitting down at night watching TV and you really want some ice cream, and that's your strongest desire in the moment. But you don't want ice cream because maybe you're on a diet or whatever, and you're trying to be good in that way. And so, but you cave to your weakness of will and you get the ice cream, and your strongest desire caused you to do this. Was that a free action? Some might say, well, it's your strongest desire, but how much was that desire up to me? It would seem like a desire that's the result of my own thinking and deliberation, a desire that I endorse, If that desire causes the action, then it's free. So imagine at night, your strongest desire is to eat the ice cream, but you think about it and you have a different desire, which is to eat some seaweed chips or something that's more healthy. So your strongest desire is to eat the ice cream, but you endorse the weaker desire to eat the seaweed chips, and then you eat the seaweed chips. Many would say, well, that seems like a more free action because it's more up to you. It's a desire that's a result of deliberating in accordance with your values. So that's one issue for Stace's version of compatibilism. It just seems like some of our desires don't really seem up to us, especially say when it comes to addiction. You really want to smoke a cigarette and you cave and you do it. Is that action really free? Is it really up to us? Especially compared to a desire that we really endorse in accordance with our values. So that's one issue here. The second one, probably more powerful part of the delta objection that Schlick talks about is desires that are the result of mental illness, neuroses, irrationality. And that's kind of like what I was just talking about. So desire that's a result of addiction, for example. You really crave a cigarette or whatever out of addiction, and then you do it. And is that really out of your free will? It's starting to look like it's not. So imagine something like this, just to push it even further. Imagine there's a person who has paranoid schizophrenia inside a house, and he has a strong desire to put aluminum foil all on the windows because that's going to prevent birds outside from reading his thoughts. And also aluminum foil around his head. He wants to do this and he acts on this desire. Was that really free? So Schlick is saying that's not really free because the desire results from delusions, paranoia, and it doesn't seem like those desires are really up to us. It's the result of some sort of mental illness. And so what Schlick wants to do here is retain the basic idea of Stace, that an action is free if it's caused by something internal, a psychological state, a desire, but amend Stace's definition of a free action so that it can avoid these problems. Well, how do we do that? Well, here's what I'm going to call Compatibilism V2, version 2. And this is based off of Schlick's critique that we just saw of Stace's compatibilism. So it's more Schlick, we need to amend Stace's compatibilism, and he basically says, okay, a free action, this is Schlick, Compatibilism V2. A free action is one which is caused by unimpeded rational desires. That is, desires that are the result of rational deliberation, desires that are truly your own. So this is adding just a couple more conditions onto the definition of free will. Now, one interesting upshot of this is that since a desire can be more or less impeded and be more or less rational and the result of deliberation, then there can be degrees of freedom. Something can be more, an action can be more or less done out of free will, just depending on how rational your desire is that causes the action. So that's an interesting upshot of Schlick's compatibilism V2. And just to kind of sum up what I just talked about today real quick, in a nutshell, we looked at determinism. Stace comes and tries to rescue free will from determinism by making compatible the fact that all things are caused with the existence of free will. The way he does that is he says, well, determinist, what you get wrong is the definition of free will. Rather, the correct definition of a free action is an action that's caused by desires. And then he gave his argument for that, which you need to know. Then we saw some critique of Stace's definition of a free action. Schlick critiques this. He gives an amended definition that helps out Stace, and that brought us to Compatibilism version 2, which basically says an action is free if it's caused by a desire that is the result of rational deliberation and is unimpeded by neuroses or mental illness or that kind of thing. All right, so that should bring us to the end.